The enemy forces arrived late in the year. It was only a few weeks before the first snow. Unusual for an enemy to come so late. Normally, the enemies show up in the springtime or summer, the seasons of war. But this group, they showed up late in the year, and they showed up ready to stay. They worked their way through the countryside, destroying, looting, pillaging, harvesting all they could from the communities. Maybe that's one of the reasons they did what they did, because all the harvest was in. All the peasants, all the commoners had gathered everything they had for the cold winter. And the enemy took it. They set up camp, and they came prepared. They were ready for the winter. The forces within your keep, they met them on the field of battle. But they didn't waste themselves. They didn't lay their blood down on the barren fields, for they knew they had a place to retreat to that the enemy could not breach. So they pulled themselves behind their walls, pulled up the drawbridge, and waited. And the enemy was out there all winter. And in a few weeks, the thaw shall break. And then the fighting shall resume. So this is an idea for a campaign built around the focus of a siege. Inspired partly with an idea I came up with years ago, and partly because at the moment I'm reading a book about siegecraft. And this is going to be focused on the younger members of the younger people living within the sieged settlement or keep. Now, the size of this is dependent upon what the GM needs. It could just be a keep. It could be a walled keep with a small walled village around it, or it could be an entire walled town. It's really up to what the campaign calls for, how big the enemy is, what have you. It's going to probably want to have it to be fairly low magic for the most part, at least not many mages, because let's face it, in Pathfinder and D&D and in most fantasy settings, magic breaks sieges in a big, fat, hairy way. But maybe the enemy is magic adverse. Maybe they're zealots that are anti-magic. Maybe that's why they're here, because the people living inside the settlement, whether it's just a keep or an entire walled town, are practitioners of magic, and this enemy has come here to scourge the earth of their blasphemy, what have you. Fill in the blanks. And this is going to be centered around the kids. So you're talking about, like, say, 13 to 16, right in that range, just before they become full adults in the eyes of the community. Okay? And to put a slight twist on this, every player character is going to be a first level member of a non-player character class. So there's the adept, there's an arcane version of that from Eberron, I think. The mage something or other, or I can't quite remember what they're called. But it's basically the arcane version of an adept. You've got commoners, you get experts, you have and nobility. So these are the classes that the player characters are allowed to take. Now, I would limit it to one noble. That would be my one caveat. And everyone should be picking a class that will move itself well into what the player character class they eventually want the character to be. Now, this would not be a handicap. So if the campaign were to go to a full 20 level arc, they would get 21 levels. They would allow to have one level of NPC and then full 20 without adversely affecting their NPCs being considered multi-class. They wouldn't be considered multi-class. They would only have that one level of the NPC class, and everything else would be on top of that. It does mean that they're going to have a slight power curve over your average first level character, but not much, because the NPC classes are not hugely powerful. If they're going to play a warrior, that's subpar to a fighter in every conceivable way. But it's still better than, at combat, it's still better than a commoner or an expert. Now, the expert is a really good entry for a rogue or a ranger. Um, an adept is a good entry for a cleric or a paladin. And of course, the arcane NPC class, which is blanking in my head at the moment, is it a great entry for a wizard or a sorcerer or something like that. Of course, the sorcerers being, or a warlock, being really the magic is within them as opposed to something that they're cognitively training for. You could just make them an expert just for fun or something like that, because that's a little bit more flexibility. You say they maybe they have an interest in the arcane to some degree, but they haven't really shown any true as skill at it yet because their abilities are triggered by something externally. I usually have it be something that kicks in during the hormonal surge of becoming an adult. So the whole adolescent thing helps kick in their magical abilities if they're a warlock or a sorcerer. And it's usually a single event, and at least for sorcerers, they usually have a talisman from that event that becomes kind of their magic focus. Um, I give sorcerers a free askew materials feat, but they have to have their item of focus. If they don't, they lose one level of spellcasting power until they recover that focus or they create a new focus item, whatever it happens to be. That's part of the development. So you've got this group of people, they're the younger kids, and someone in the castle has decided, or the settlement decided, they need to get out for two reasons. One, someone has decided that somebody needs to get out of here and survive this, but they also need to get to a local community to get help from an ally. Now, the ally is 30 miles away. 30 miles doesn't seem long to you and me. I drove 111 miles yesterday just to go antiquing. Okay? And I bought a book. So it was no big deal for me to do that. But 30 miles across, for the most part, unbroken ground because the roads are going to be patrolled and the river is going to be patrolled by the enemy. That's like 2.5 to 3 days to get there. And if they encounter some resistance along the way, which is going to be fairly common, because in the wake of an army comes an entire retinue of hangers-ons, prostitutes, entertainers, traders, and of course the parasites, the salvagers, and the bandits. The people that are more than willing to pick up stragglers, whether it's displaced commoners or the enemy, and sell them into slavery, and just kill them and rob them, or rob them and let them go. So there's going to be dangers out there. So the campaign starts with the characters getting to the ally with a letter. They hand it over, and they're going to have to role play this. They're going to have to convince them. Yes, I know this sounds. That spring's going to come in 2 weeks. We know this. The enemy's has already started to build siege weapons right there on the spot with the hardware they brought with them. So we need to do something because very shortly we are going to be under attack. You need to help us. And of course, there may be machinations going on inside the citadel where they're from, because people could be duplicitous. There could be backstabbers and a fifth column inside, or they could just be discussing maybe we can buy ourselves out of this. We can bribe them to go away, or the rich folks are going to say maybe we can bribe ourselves to freedom, or at least neutrality, so that we are not harmed when they finally breach in. So there could be a lot of political things going on, and you could play that before the characters leave. You can get them involved, so you could give them a week of of bickering and backstabbing within the citadel, and then they have to leave because they have a 2-week window. So they have to get there in 3 or 4 days, alert there, and hope they can send some kind of forces in the remaining 10 days for them to get some relief. Because if they can get relief from the outside with the forces they have inside in a pincer movement, maybe they will have some chance of success. And there's the possibility that the ally doesn't want to do it, and you have to convince them. Maybe they won't do it. Maybe the point of this is for them to fail, and the player characters are now on their own, out in the world, without any allies, they've lost their families. And as I mentioned, only one noble in the group, and you can make that some person that is like third or fourth down the family chain, so no one that's going to ever get a title. They may get, they're never going to get any. The estate's never going to go to them. The best they're going to do is that their estate outside the settlement, if it's still standing, is they could live there for the rest of their life without rent. That's the best they're going to look for. They're not going to get much else out of this. They're very low on the nobility totem pole. But they are still a noble, and they would still be called lord or lady as an adult. So they have that kind of a political, though not great, economic pull in the world. So this is just an idea I came up with. I thought people might be able to use it. Of course, you're going to need to flesh it out. I don't know what the enemy is. Are they humanoid? Are they human? Is it a purely fiscal process? Is it long-standing feuds? Is it someone who's been getting aggressive and trying to take over more territory? You can all kind of, has your city precipitated this? So your settlement, whatever it is, has they done something politically that got this enemy force to show up on their doorstep? What's the fallout if they win? What did the commoners do? You guys all went in the city. You left us out here at the mercy of this army. Whether this army is, 400 people or 40,000. So there could be some ramifications even if they win. So tell me, what would you do with this? How would you use it? Do you have a particular party mix that you think that your group would really like, or one that you think is kind of ideal for the situation? So let's talk about the best way to use a siege as a jumping off point for a campaign, because it makes perfect sense that all the player characters are in one spot, so there is no bickering about how the party got together, because we know how they got together. They are refugees from a siege.